inspired by your words. I'll write them down until it hurts. You told me things they never heard. I never knew what's in your head, but now I know it's full of rain, and you are trying to find yourself. Oh, to find yourself. To find yourself. You tell me you are fine, you don't need to lie. I know you're tired, boy, I know you're tired. You tell me you are fine, you don't need to lie. You don't need to lie, 'cause I know you're tired, boy. You're tired, boy. You're tired, tired. You're tired, boy. I know what's in your mind. I know you're tired. I know what's in your mind. You're tired. I know what's in your mind. I know you're tired. I know what's in your mind. You're tired. I feel inspired by your words. I'll write them down until it hurts. You told me things they never heard. I never knew.
Skin has been in favor for the past, couple of hundreds of years.
Brothers, did you hear that? This character tells the character of Chris, fair skin, when he says fair skin, he's talking about so-called Caucasian skin, has been in favor for the last couple of hundreds of years. What's that, brothers? That's only 200 years. They're letting you know that the quote-unquote Caucasian rulership really started in the late 1700s, early 1800s. He was supposed to say that quote-unquote fair skin has been in favor for the last 2,000 plus years, according to the official historical narrative. Why did he only say the last couple of hundreds of years? What was he letting you know about the cultural mores of Europe up until the 1700s, even into the early 1800s in some parts of Europe and America? He knows that so-called dark skin, or the copper-colored people, or the copper-colored races, the quote-unquote red skin, or what have you, has always been the preferred look amongst all men, all people on the planet Earth.
But now the pendulum is swung back. Black is in fashion.
He said the pendulum has swung back. In other words, at one time the so-called black man was in favor when it came to his looks and his physical characteristics. It went to the so-called Caucasian through propaganda and through having the ability to rule the world for a certain dispensation of time, and now it's in the process of swinging back. And that's also going to be the downfall of the quote-unquote global Marxist agenda. In order for the powers that be to bring about ultimate confusion, they have to empower the same group of people who they were allowed to take down in order to ascend to power in the first place, because they're trying to destroy the Bible. That's why the constant themes are, the Bible is the white man's book. They push those themes and motifs in order to make the so-called black man believe that he's being appeased. But in the process of allowing the so-called black man and other races and demographics to elevate, that ultimately is going to lead to the demise of those who are in power right now.
Yo, what's good? Hey, I just wanted to make this quick little excerpt, and I got a series coming on this eventually on the black rulership of Europe based on my research and my findings, and as well as other people as well. And you know, I don't want this channel to be all about, you know, me taking credit for a lot of this stuff, but you got to give credit where credit's due. So I want to credit this video to my brother Chronicles of Judah 144, man, because he's really the main content creator that got me into this truth, man. So he had a few videos a few years ago, you know, kind of chronicling the black nobility in Europe, as well as, you know, Aboriginal history and stuff, and the true spiritual entities and deities that dictate this so-called society. And he touched on this a little bit, but I think since last year he hasn't been on YouTube, so he's got a Patreon. I'm gonna drop that link in the description below to his Patreon, man, so y'all can go subscribe to that. You know, I think you can pledge as much money you want to, but this is where he drops a lot of his information, because a lot of it's just too controversial for YouTube. I'm sure this one will be okay, but nonetheless, just let you know this is me talking. This is Chronicles of Judah, and he's got in-depth series, man. I think this is like a part 9 on one of his series. So I just wanted to clear things up with a lot of what's going on in the midst of, you know, this so-called pandemic going on, and let you know this is nothing new for them to use, you know, medical reasoning to bring about rulership.
Okay, so brothers, I remember when I first started to talk about the quote-unquote Black Plague, or the Black Death, also known as the Boubonic Plague, and I stated that it was not spread by rats. I would have some know-it-alls come into my comment section and claim that I didn't know what I was talking about. I said it was not spread by rats or fleas, it was spread by human beings. It was spread by the wild men. It was spread by the wild men who were marching westward. Now look at this information from BBC News. It says here, Black Death spread by humans, not rats. Written by Victoria Gill. This article was written in January 15th of 2018. This was well after I already made my statement about the quote-unquote bubonic plague. It was very obvious that it was not spread by rats, but I mean, that's neither here nor there. Let's read what she has to say. At the top it says, the bite of rat-borne fleas infected with the bubonic plague has been blamed for disease transmission during the medieval pandemic. Rats were not to blame for the spread of plague during the Black Death, according to a study. The rodents and their fleas were thought to have spread a series of outbreaks in 14th to 19th century Europe. Isn't that interesting? From the 14th to the 19th century is exactly when we started to lose our rulership in Europe. Ain't that a bitch? Don't I tell you, brothers, that we did not completely lose Europe until the Marxist revolutions of 1848 cast out the vestiges of the black ruling families that were sitting on the throne? The kings and queens were black. That's why the only queen that's allowed to be called a queen is the Queen of England, and she's not a real queen. But let's read on. It says here, the rodents and their fleas were thought to have spread a series of outbreaks in 14th to 19th century Europe. But a team from the universities of Oslo and Ferrara now says the first, the Black Death, can be largely ascribed to human fleas and body lice. Brothers, who's carrying body lice other than people who have long body hair? Somebody help me out with that shit. Who has body lice other than people with excessive body hair? Reading on, it says, the study in the proceedings of the National Academy of Science uses records of its pattern and scale. The Black Death claimed an estimated 25 million lives, more than a third of Europe's population, between 1347 and 1351. Brothers, that's when our rulership started to falter. Around that time, you also had serf rebellions, meaning the rebellion of the Caucasians who were living on the land of the black nobility, and they were tired of being bossed around. So you combine that with the quote-unquote Black Plague, and that's how we started to lose Europe. And that's why we've been written out of European rulership history, because They don't want us to ever know that shit. So, brothers, I'm going to go back to that article that I was reading, but I just wanted to provide some context about the assertion that was stated in the article pertaining to body lice, and how that's what caused the spread of the plague, not rats. Now, this is an excerpt from a book called The 13th Tribe, written by Arthur Koestler. Now, let's see what he says here. It says, accustomed to the splendid baths of Baghdad, our traveler could not get over the dirtiness of the Turks. Now, the Turks, for those of you who don't know, were the group of Caucasians who eventually emerged from the bottomless pit, aka the Caucasus Mountains, to conquer a certain portion, a relatively large portion of Eastern Europe, of the Middle East, and of Northern Africa. They're the main reason why you have people living in those lands who are trying to claim that they're Egyptian or that they're Moroccan or that they're the original quote-unquote Turks, people of Turkey, really Asia Minor or Byzantium, but they're not. They're not the original inhabitants of those lands. The original inhabitants of those lands were quote-unquote people of color. As a matter of fact, the original inhabitants of the place that's called Turkey today were the Japhites. I believe that they were known as the Ionian League, the sons of Javan or Yawan. And they were people of color. You understand? But just getting back to what we're reading here, it says, accustomed to the splendid baths of Baghdad, our traveler could not get over the dirtiness of the Turks. The ghouls do not wash themselves after defecating or urinating, nor do they bathe after seminal pollution or on other occasions. In other words, they never take a bath. Whether they're fucking, shitting, pissing. You understand that? They don't bathe. That's why it was a constant theme in the film Harry and the Hendersons that, they made fun of his smell, his odor. So reading on. Nor do they bathe after seminal pollution or on other occasions. They refuse to have anything to do with water, particularly in winter. When the Ghouls commander-in-chief took off his luxurious coat of brocade to don a new coat, the mission had brought him, they saw that his underclothes were fraying apart from dirt, for it is their custom never to take off the garment they wear close to their bodies until it disintegrates. Another Turkish tribe, the Bashkirs, shave their beards and eat their lice. They search the folds of their undergarments and crack the lice with their teeth. When Ibn Fadlan watched a Bashkir do this, the latter remarked to him, "They are delicious." Alright? I can't lay it out much clearer than this. If you still don't get it, brother, God bless you. But let's go back to the article. It says here, we have good mortality data from outbreaks in 9 cities in Europe. Professor Niels Stenseth from the University of Oslo told BBC News. So we could construct models of the disease dynamics there. He and his colleagues then simulated disease outbreaks in each of these cities, creating 3 models where the disease was spread by rats, airborne transmission, or fleas and lice that live on humans and their clothes. In 7 out of the 9 cities studied, the human parasite model was a much better match for the pattern of the outbreak. It mirrored how quickly it spread and how many people it affected. The conclusion was very clear, said Professor Stenseth. The lice model fits best. I'm going to read it again. It says, the lice model fits best. It would be unlikely to spread as fast as it did if it was transmitted by rats. It would have to go through this extra loop of the rats rather than being spread from person to person. Stay at home. Professor Stenseth said the study was primarily of historical interest, using modern understanding of disease to unpick what had happened during one of the most devastating pandemics in human history. But he pointed out, understanding as much as possible about what goes on during an epidemic is always good if you are to reduce mortality in the future. Plague is still endemic in some countries of Asia, Africa, and the Americas, where it persists in reservoirs of infected rodents. Once again, brothers, they've been trying to blame the rat for what happened during the Boubonic, aka the Black Plague, as I always tell you, they tell you the truth in code because they can't help themselves. They have that practical joker mentality, that joker spirit on them. So they can't keep it contained all the way. The Most High won't let them because they have to let out hints so that the people who can discern can figure it out. Just reading on, it says, according to the World Health Organization from 2010 to 2015, there were 3,248 cases reported worldwide, including 584 deaths. And in 2001, a study that decoded the plague genome used a bacterium that had come from a vet in the U.S. who had died in 1992 after a plague-infested cat sneezed on him as he had been trying to rescue it from underneath a house. Our study suggests that to prevent future spread, hygiene is most important, said Professor Stenseth. It also suggests that if you're ill, you shouldn't come into contact with too many people, so if you're sick, stay at home. Now this is another article on the Black Death. This was written in 2011, updated August 30th, 2018, so obviously it was updated around the same time as the previous article's findings were released. It says, can we stop blaming rats for the Black Death? A new study suggests that humans, not vermin, spread the Black Death and that the disease may not have been bubonic plague after all. Of course it wasn't. Of course it wasn't. It was those wild men spreading them damn lice and them other diseases as they marched across Europe. That's why I show you that tapestry of the Black Knights trying to fight against them. But they were fighting against people, and they were fighting against airborne diseases that they couldn't handle. This article was written by Jenny Cohen. It says, after 10 years of poring over documents and archaeological evidence attesting to the Black Death's devastation of London in the late 1340s, Barney Sloane smelled a rat, or rather, he failed to catch a whiff of the flea-infested rodent armies most scholars have charged with spreading the fatal disease. See, what's going on right now is you have a new generation of historians and scholars who are doing independent research, and they think that the scholars from the 1800s were wrong. It's not that they were wrong, it's that they found the real archives and they burned them, and they told a lie. They agreed to tell a lie to hide the truth. But now these independent scholars who don't know any better, they're looking shit up for themselves and they're saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is not what happened. So just reading on, it says, or rather, he failed to catch a whiff of the flea-infested rodent armies most scholars have charged with spreading the fatal disease. In a new book published last month, Sloane paints a revised picture of England's most populous city in the throes of the terrifying pandemic, suggesting, among other things, that some of history's most vilified pests deserve an apology. Similarly considered an outbreak of the bubonic plague, which is transmitted by rats and fleas, the Black Death wreaked havoc on Europe, North Africa, and Central Asia in the mid-14th century. Isn't that interesting? Aren't those the same locations where the Turks went to and the other wild men? Anyway, reading on. It killed an estimated 75 million people, including 30 to 60% of Europe's population. According to the traditional narrative, the crisis reached England in the spring of 1348 and began assailing its capital by late summer. Scores of Londoners developed painful swellings that oozed blood and pus before suffering fevers, chills, vomiting, and severe aches and pains that often heralded their imminent deaths. In the course of his book research, Sloane, who handles research grants for the organization English Heritage, uncovered clues that cast doubt on certain aspects of this account. First, using previously untapped archival sources, he adjusted the timeline of the plague sojourn in London in 1348 and 1349. The evidence shows the plague appeared in November and reached its height in April, he explained. So it spread right through the cold winter months when rats and fleas should not be so active. If vermin played a significant role, he theorized, plague cases would have petered out, not snowballed, when temperatures began to fall. Exactly. It says here, a former field archaeologist at the Museum of London, Sloan also found that excavations in the city have turned up little evidence of a massive rat die-off coinciding with the plague. I said this when I first started talking about the Black Plague. I think it was in the video that I did on Leonardo da Vinci. I stated, where are all the rat bones? Where are the rat bones? If the rats were the reason why this plague was spread so rampantly. So just reading on, it says tens of thousands of people died, he said. If it was rats that spread the disease, they too should have died in the thousands. And we would expect to see a significant number of rat bones in waterlogged 14th century contexts. Instead, we see generally low levels of bones, which is suspicious. Finally, wills hastily drafted by panic-stricken Londoners as the Black Death ravaged their communities revealed that the disease proliferated like wildfire. In many affected households, people died within hours or days of signing, and their beneficiaries followed them to the grave in short order. Wow. In Sloan's view, this rapid rate of transmission suggests that the plague spread from person to person, not through bites from rat-borne fleas. And what this also means, brothers, is that the only way for the so-called blacks who were in rulership to lose their power was for something this calamitous to occur. That's how dominant they were during that time period. So the Most High basically was sanctioning the removal of so-called blacks from the throne so that the so-called white man could step up to the plate and rule to fulfill prophecy. But just reading on, it says here, in Sloan's view, this rapid rate of transmission suggests that the plague spread from person to person, not through bites from rat-borne fleas. Sloan said his findings call into question the theory that bubonic plague caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis was responsible for decimating medieval Europe. Other researchers, including James Wood of Penn State University, have expressed similar doubts, pointing out that the pandemic's hallmark symptoms occur in many other diseases that spread quickly among human carriers. In October of 2010, a group of European scientists claimed to have settled the debate by using DNA analysis to implicate Yersinia pestis in the outbreak, but their study did not encompass pre-1348 graves, so it is possible that the bacterium was present but not the actual killer, said Sloan. On balance, I'm suggesting we need to be more scientific and do more work before claiming we have solved the mystery, he explained. Well, I can help you out. And I don't even have to do all that bullshit y'all doing. I can tell you what happened. The wild men did that shit, bro. That's what happened. I know he gonna be like, okay, so how do I write a paper on that? I have to write a paper so I can get paid. I said, well, shit. Just write the wild men did it and submit that. See what happened. In his book, Sloan challenges other prevailing assumptions about the Black Death in London as well, including its casualty count. London's population was maybe 60,000, Sloan said. I believe firmly that something like 35,000 people died in 9 months, up to 60% of the population. This is considerably higher than the 35 to 45% normally suggested. He also explores how the aftermath of the plague, which left its ghastly stamp on England and Europe for decades, shaped the social and moral context of the era. They clearly changed how Londoners at least approached death, burial, and charity to their fellows, he said. Survivors tended to give more away to good causes in their wills. They included more instructions to be buried close to loved ones, and they made more bequests to particular social groups such as lepers, prisoners, and hermits. Once again, he says 60% of the population was destroyed because of the Black Plague. I believe that. Because probably about 85 to 90% of the people in Europe during that time period were so-called black. Or at least prior to the decimation of the bubonic plague. I'll say at the lowest, maybe 75%. But the vast majority of those people were so-called black. Now this is the Science article. It says ancient DNA traces the Black Death to Russia's Volga region. Oh my goodness. Brothers, that's the Caucasus Mountains, man. I mean, this it's all there right for us to see. This is written by Ann Gibbons. It says here, ancient DNA traces the Black Death to Russia's Volga region. In the 14th century, the Black Death wiped out as much as 60% of the population of Europe, spreading rapidly from the shores of the Black Sea to Central Europe. Although historical records first document its appearance in 1346 Common Era in the lower Volga region of Russia, researchers didn't know whether the highly virulent strain of Yersinia pestis bacterium that caused the deadly pandemic came from a single source or was introduced to Europe more than once by travelers carrying diverse strains of plague from different parts of the ancient world. Now, by analyzing 34 ancient genomes of Y. pestis from the teeth of people buried at 10 sites across Europe from the 14th to 17th centuries, including a mass grave in Toulouse, France, researchers at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena, Germany, have found the earliest known evidence of this pandemic comes from Lashivo in Russia's Volga region. There, researchers found a strain of Y. pestis that was ancestral to all other genomes they studied, differing by only one mutation from those that caused the Black Death in Europe, they report today in Nature Communications. That doesn't mean the Volga region was ground zero for the Black Death. It could have come from elsewhere in Western Asia, where scientists have yet to sample ancient DNA of Y. pestis. The researchers found that once the plague made it to Europe, a single strain was responsible for the Black Death from Italy to the United Kingdom. This strain also gave rise to other variants of Y. pestis that caused deadly plague outbreaks from the late 14th through the 18th centuries. Once again, brothers, that is how we lost Europe. Okay? A lot of people ask the question, how did we lose Europe? That's how. Well, that's the main reason why. Because keep in mind that the Black Plague started in the mid-14th century AD. By the mid to late 15th century, you have the start of the Reformation. And by the 16th century, the Reformation is in full swing. So that led to a lot of upheaval in Europe. So just reading on, it says, this suggests the bacterium persisted locally in Europe, perhaps in rodent hosts, where it evolved into diverse strains that caused later epidemics. So that's basically it on the Black Death. I've had a lot of you brothers ask me about that. Hopefully that answers your question. It fit into the overall theme of this series of the wild man, aka the so-called white man or so-called Caucasian. I wanted to trace the origins of the so-called Caucasian, starting in the scriptures and linking them up with secular sources. And hopefully you brothers have seen that the secular real history matches up with the Bible. You understand that? So let's continue on.
So yeah, man, that's it on that. Hey, subscribe to his channel. He don't got a lot of content over the last year or so, but he has close to 1,000 videos, I believe, from the last 3 or 4 years before that. You know, he chronicles sports, entertainment industry, history, current events, politics, everything, money system. So yeah, he's one of the ones that got me into the truth, man, and put me on a lot of the books to read. And like I said, that excerpt he had from Arthur Kessler's The 13th Tribe, I got that book too. And yeah, it pretty much was a Caucasian Jew who pretty much was, you know, had the question of you know, he answered a lot of questions, I should say, on how they came into rulership and how great of a feat that it was. But if you didn't know, he died a few years after that. I'm not sure if there's a lot of controversy surrounding why he was taken out, but a lot of Caucasian Jews, they didn't like that because they didn't want that kind of information out. But you know, he was pretty much saying that it was a great feat. You know, he looked at it the opposite way. But yeah, man, there's quite a few books that you can get on things like that, ancient and modern Britons, and you know, I'm gonna be bringing a lot of those to light in some of my future videos, but I just want to put this little excerpt in there because, you know, this kind of dispels a lot of things. And like he said, if you look up the historical timelines of what was going on with the religious wars and the serf rebellions and things like that, you know, along with the black nobility trying to be too hubris, as it was. I guess they were fighting too many wars on too many fronts. They were trying to stretch their empire all the way to the west coast and out east, even out to Ukraine. At the end of their empire, and a lot of the black bourgeoisie, which were the middle class, they were jealous and envious of the black nobility, and they started to come against, along with the serfs, started to come against the rulership. And a lot of the artifacts have been, you know, whitewashed and falsified. You know, you can look up Oliver Cromwell and the things he did, where he destroyed damn near 95% of the artifacts, but there's still some out there, man. Just gotta do the digging, and that's the point of this channel, is just to guide people in that direction, man. Guide people into what to look for. Like I said, I don't want all the credit. I can't take all the credit, but, you know, if I can just do my part to get people out of that rabbit hole, out of that, you know, that rabbit hole, that hamster wheel that they got us on. You know, they doing all these empty gestures about slavery and things like that. Nope, that is not the reason. You got to understand the real reason why. All right, so peace.